Welcome back to my channel, Famous and Fabulous. For many years, Dick Van Dyke has been identified because the completely happy and vibrant discern who captivated audiences in Mary Poppins and Chitty Chitty Bang Bang. But beyond these mythical performances, there is an aspect of Van Dyke's lifestyles that he has never absolutely disclosed until this moment in 1961. The Dick Van Dyke show becomes such an iconic piece of TV records, but at the back of that picture-ideal family vibe, there has been a lot of jealousy and anxiety that created some severe rifts. The various solid these days, at 99 years vintage. Dick Van Dyke is eventually establishing up approximately the actual drama that took place behind the scenes. What should have led this liked megastar to revel in such frustration and unhappiness? Brace yourself for a stunning insight so as to exchange how you view this famous entertainer and the profession that made him a household call. Van Dyke have become globally recognized in 1964 for his position as Bert the Chimney Sweep in Mary Poppins. He brought humor, dance, and track to the hit film, which remodeled $100 million. Nevertheless, his lackluster Cockney accessory is something that humans usually recollect. Even Van Dyke admitted he disliked Bert's accessory. Calling it awful, he stated that his accessory train who become Irish wasn't a whole lot higher at it than he became exceptionally. Nobody informed him all through filming how terrible it sounded. Despite the accent remarks, audiences loved his performance. Specifically the Step in Time Dancer series that appeared seen become pretty challenging to movie. At 41, Van Dyke had to keep pace with younger dancers. It took 23 attempts to gain the right take, and he later remarked it became the hardest dance he had ever done. Mary Poppins continues to be certainly one of Disney's most cherished stay-motion movies. However, even enthusiasts concede that Dick Van Dyke's accessory as Bert wasn't wonderful. His attempt at a Cockney accessory inside the 1964 musical is frequently dubbed one of the worst in cinematic history. Van Dyke, a local of Illinois, has said he will never escape the jokes surrounding his performance returned. Then he believed he become doing well and became unaware that it sounded off. But the grievance did not deter him from taking part inside the 2018 sequel Mary Poppins Returns. On this film, he portrayed Mr. Dorr Jr., the older son of Mr. Dorr Sr., a character he also portrayed in the authentic movie. Fortuitously, he did not ought to use the Cockney accent. Again, even in his 90s. Van Dyke introduced a memorable dance sequence within the sequel, which includes leaping onto a table, all without a stunt double. In an interview with the New York Times, he expressed that he put in good-sized effort to make certain he seemed like a Brit and did no longer repeat his earlier mistake. Despite his portrayal of Bert and Mary Poppins not being flawless, no person can dispute how hard Dick Van Dyke worked to reap fulfillment. The criticism did not prevent him from acting within the 2018 sequel, Mary Poppins Returns. This time he performed Mr. Dorr Jr., the older son of Mr. Dorr Sr., whom he additionally played in the unique. Thankfully, he didn't need to use the Cockney accessory again. Even in his 9s, Van Dyke achieved a memorable dance scene consisting of leaping onto a desk without a stunt double. In an interview with the New York Times, he said he labored difficult to sound like a Brit and keep away from his earlier mistake. Notwithstanding the accessory criticism, people loved his overall performance, in particular the step time dance scene. This became very difficult to film. Van Dyke, 41 at the time, needed to keep up with younger dancers. It took 23 takes, and he later referred to as it the hardest dance he ever did. Mary Poppins is one in all Disney's maximum loved live-action movies, but even fans admit Dick Van Dyke's Chuck accent wasn't super. His strive at a Cockney accent is frequently called one of the worst in movie history. Van Dyke, born in Illinois, has stated he will in no way stay down the jokes on the time he became doing an excellent task job. In spite of the accessory, nobody can deny Dick Van Dyke's difficult paintings. However, when did he first turn out to be well known? Hold Looking the musical. The Girls Towards the Boys, Gavevan. DJK, his large Destroy on Broadway lower back in 1959. Even though the show best lasted 16 performances, his performance especially of the cell phone tune, actually stuck people's attention. Critics and manufacturers took word, which brought about his predominant function. In Bye Bye Birdie, and actually modified the game for him. His existence took a huge turn in 1961 when he landed a part of Rob Petrie on the Dick Van DJK display. That position wasn't even meant for him at the start. Creator Carl Reiner, surely deliberate to play Rob himself. However, producer Sheldon Leonard Notion, Van DJK changed into best for the part after seeing him in Bye Bye Birdie. He even beat out Johnny Carson for it. They made the selection to forged him handiest 18 days earlier than filming began, and CBS had some last-minute doubts in the end, went with Van Dyke, which left him scrambling to put together in below 3 weeks. Van Dyke in the beginning acquired $1,250 in line with episode. That's about $11,000 in modern-day foreign money by the very last season. His revenue elevated to $35,000 in line with episode. Even though the display faced challenges within the beginning, CBS nearly determined to cancel it. However, Procter & Gamble stepped in, threatening to withdraw their commercials. The sturdy chemistry between Dick Van DJK and Mary Tyler Moore played a crucial role in the display's achievement. Their real on-screen courting gave the series any other opportunity. It quick climbed to apposition within the top 10 ratings. At that time, Van DJK turned into 36 years antique, whilst Moore became 25, which to start with worried the producers. However, their chemistry turned into unmistakable. They maintained a professional demeanor. Different cast individuals additionally performed a part in the show's success in the course of the years. Some unfavorable comments have been made about Dick Van Dyke's existence. He has recounted that some of those criticisms are genuine. What are the one's problems and how severe are they? Let's explore. Dick Van DJK changed into Bornan, December 13th, 1925 in West Plains, Missouri. It became a small city with best a few thousand citizens, and his early lifestyle seemed quite easy. His mum Hazel labored as a typist at the same time as his father Lauren bought cookies for her employer. They lived in regular existence, but no one may want to have guessed that Dick might one day turn out to be a famous entertainer. Interestingly, West Plains had a surprising history of manufacturing stars, like Porter Wagner and Jan Howard. It is amusing to notice that the year Dick was born. Charlie Chaplin's movie The Gold Rush become launched, a movie that embodies the kind of comedy for which Dick could later come to be nicely regarded when Dick became nonetheless a child. His own family moved to Danville, Illinois, when Dick becomes still a baby. His own family moved to Danville, Illinois, a larger metropolis with about 30 citizens. Dick remarked that it felt like most of the city was made of his loved ones, as anybody knew every other. This became all through the 1930s, a hard time marked with the aid of the Great Depression, when money became tight for almost anybody. On the grounds that Dick's family couldn't come up with the money for a radio they could visit, a neighbor house to concentrate, to popular suggests, which sparked his love for amusement. Danville also grew to become out to be a special vicinity for expertise. Some of Dick's classmates, like Donald O'Connor from Singing Inside the Rain and singer Bobby Quick, additionally went on to turn out to be stars in excessive faculty. Dick considered the opportunity of turning into a minister, but everything changed after he joined the drama club. He determined that he had a passion for singing and dancing, and he excelled at it. Because of World War II, faculties had to create their own plays and musicals since they couldn't come up with the money to buy rights to well-known shows. Dick landed the nice roles because of his height and powerful voice. Despite the fact that the productions were not complex, they provided him with a glimpse of what it turned into. Want to perform. Few years later, in 2004, he went lower back to his former high school to get hold of his degree and even acted in Bye Bye Birdie. Along the students this demonstrate show considerable those years have been to him in 1944, while nevertheless a excessive faculty. Scholar Dick made the selection to enlist in the U.S. Army Air Forces. He aspired to emerge as a pilot at some stage in World War II, but confronted a hurdle. He became underweight status at 61 in and weighing simply 135 pounds. He failed to fulfill the weight standards, but he continued. He consumed bananas and drank water till he in the end reached the required weight to qualify. Once he enlisted, he discovered that flying plane wasn't this ardor as an alternative. He changed into assigned to a unique unit, wherein he supplied amusement for troops he created. Level sets finished in productions, and even took on the role of a radio announcer. Dick later humorously remarked that his fear of flying ultimately led him to a career in show business. He served until 1946, and people years allowed him to uncover his passion for acting. At the age of 22 in 1947, Van Dyke landed his first function as a radio DJ at WDN Asmal Station, located in Danville. With no earlier enjoy, he walked into the station, asked an audition, and became employed without delay. He hosted the morning show from 7 a.m. to noon and fast became a fave among listeners. He possessed a herbal presence for humor and could invent amusing characters and voices throughout his publicizes. Certainly one of his most cherished segments become titled Man on the Street, offering playful and funny interviews with neighborhood citizens. On April 1, 1948, he pulled off a huge prank through convincing the complete town that a UFO had landed. The ensuing commotion caused the police being inundated with calls. Even though he almost faced termination, the incident handiest amplified his fame in Danville. Later that war, Van Dyke met up with Phil Erickson, a guy recognized for his incredible pantomime skills. Phil really appreciated Van Dyke's sense of humor and suggested they team up as a comedy duo. They determined to call themselves Eric and Van. The Marimutes there suggests had been something audiences had never visible earlier than they carried out silent acts, lip-syncing to classic songs, even as appearing out humorous scenarios. Certainly one of their maximum famous bits had them pretending to be an opera singer and a frustrated conductor, swapping roles for a great laugh. From 1947 to 1953, the Merry Mutes hit the street acting in golf equipment all over the West Coast. They definitely committed to their craft, frequently placing on 5 suggests every night all week. Lengthy in 1950. They even made records by pulling off 35 indicates in a single week in Los Angeles. Their large damage got here in 1951 after they released their personal TV display, The Merry Mutes Show, on WSB-TV in Atlanta. This publicity helped them grow to be famous nationwide, and they even got to appear on The Ed Sullivan Show in 1952. Their skits like that hilarious gradual motion football recurring, without a doubt linked with audiences everywhere. But in 1953, Erickson decided to step away from the entertainment scene, which regrettably marked the end in their partnership. Van Dyke but saved going sturdy in his career after his time with the Merry Mutes. Van Dyke became his attention to television. In 1955, he commenced hosting the CBS morning show, wherein he brought his specific humor and creativity to the table, teaming up with puppeteer Bill Beard to create amusing skits and characters. In 1956, he gave website hosting a sport display called To Inform the Factor Shot, but its simplest lasted 13 episodes. Nevertheless, it became a very good learning enjoy for Stay TV. Van Dyke truly began to polish in 1957 when he starred at the Phil Silver display, playing 2 different roles, a hillbilly baseball participant and a cousin. Each person loved him, and the display's creator even concept, approximately, giving him his own spin-off, though that didn't manifest. In 1959, Van Dyke hit the Broadway stage in a musical called The Girls Towards the Men, but it turned into a brief run final after simply 16 performances. However, he made Arabist influence mainly with a track known as the Telephone Tune, wherein he acted out each facets of a telephone name while dancing round a cell phone. Booth critics and manufacturers took be aware of his skills, and he even snagged a Theatre World Award for being an up-and-coming star. This performance led him to his next large position inside the musical Bye Bye Birdie, which might trade the entirety for him. After Mary Poppins, Van Dyke landed a position in Chitty Bang Bang in 1968, gambling Caracas Potts, an inventor who creates a magical flying vehicle. The film was crammed with fun little information, like how the car had components from an old World War I plane, seeing that Van Dyke couldn't drive a stick shift, They had to use special automatic automobiles for his scenes. One of the hardest elements to shoot changed into the old bamboo dance, which took 23 attempts to get proper, much like with Mary Poppins even. With all of the filming demanding situations, the film turned out to be a liked family, traditional in 1969. Van Dyke decided to mix matters up with the comic. This film became one of a kind from his typical mild-hearted stuff. It tells the story of a silent film comedian named Billy Bry, whose life falls apart due to his very own mistakes. The film kicks off with Billy's funeral, and then dives into his backstory through flashbacks. Van Dyke's overall performance turned into critical and emotional displaying of the exceptional side of his skills. Even though the film did not do well on the field workplace, it later were given identified for its honest look at the struggles of fame and lifestyles inside the silent film generation. After the Dick Van Dyke show wrapped up in 1966, Dick Van Dyke became back on TV with the new Dick Van Dyke display in 1971. He played Dick Preston, a talk display host residing in Phoenix, Arizona. The show kicked off on September 18th, precisely 10 years after his first hit collection. This time round, they tackled a few pretty extreme subjects like interracial relationships and childless marriages, topics that have been pretty a good deal off the desk in the 60s. Regardless of these fresh themes, the display didn't get tons of love from visitors. Writer Carl Reiner later referred to that. The rankings had been in reality low. By means of the final season, they switched the putting to Hollywood, with Dick's character becoming a cleaning soap opera celebrity. However, that trade failed to help. There were also a few at the back of the scenes problems, especially while CBS banned an episode called Lieutenant Preston of the 4th Cavalry. This ticked off Carl Reiner, who changed into a key writer, and he ended up quitting without him. Van Dyke felt the show couldn't continue to exist. It ultimately wrapped up in 1974 after a total of 72 episodes. As he celebrated his 99th birthday, Van Dyke expressed his appreciation for the swift actions of his acquaintances and others who rescued both him and his belongings from a perilous hearth. He referred to that while trying to installation a fire hose. He became aware of the imminent hazard. It could not arise, so they had to raise me and convey me to the automobile. They saved my life and my house, he explained. Associates answered, speedy as flames threatened them. One rescuer referred to in that moment, I found out I had to place everything else aside and get these human beings protection. He is more difficult than he claims. I helped him into the automobile. And just as I finished, he took keep of my arm and pleaded, please do not allow my house burn down. The organization applied a neighbor's hearth safety device and garden hoses to keep the returned house. We blanketed his residence and all of their reminiscences internal. That is what truly subjects, they stated. Van Dyke conveyed his gratitude. He appears forward to his next birthday, but needs it might not be stuffed. With the equal fiery drama, Dick Van Dyke confronted wildfires in La, pointing out there has been no energy or warmness at his Malibu house. The famous person of Mary Poppins and his spouse Arlene Silver provided updates on Instagram. Notwithstanding their issues, they determined approaches to manipulate the situation. Van Dyke changed into reluctant towed apart their $8 million home. Arlen remarked, he doesn't want to head anywhere else, to which Van Dyke introduced, I love our house to evolve. Arlene were given creative preparing meals in their small camper van, parked inside the driveway. Manor it have become. Their snug domestic, they made the maximum of the state of affairs, taking part in out-of-doors dining. Dick Van Dyke's achievements were first-rate. What accolades has he earned? He acquired his first Emmy in 1964 for the Dick Van Dyke Show, winning once more in 1965 and 1966. In 1976, at the age of 50, he earned every other Emmy for Van Dyke and Company. In 2024, at 98, he gained an Emmy for Days of Our Lives. He has garnered 6 Emmys and received 10 nominations in general. In 1984, he won for a kids' software, and in 2015, he changed into nominated for Mickey Mouse Clubhouse. He shared a Grammy with Julie Andrews for the Mary Poppins soundtrack. In 65, in 2013, at 87, he turned into honored with the Screen Actor Guild Existence Achievement Award. In 1998, he changed into provided with the Disney Legends award through Disney, he disclosed that he did not be given any payment for his paintings on Mary Poppins in 2021. At the age of 95, he became presented the Kennedy Center Honors. His alma mater named their auditorium after him. What do you consider Dick Van Dyke's life?